night I found the body, I wasn't even supposed to be out. Earlier in the evening, my sister Dawn had been reported missing. I had slipped out through my bedroom window and, with the aid of the tree beside our house, had climbed down to do my own investigations. The police, who at the time of my escape were still downstairs in the living room with my parents, had no idea that I had gotten out, or that I had invested such little faith in their powers of detection and ability to find my sister alive. As it turned out, on that last point, I was found to be completely correct. Whilst the thick fog and the fact that the 3-day weekend power cuts had shut the lights off made the job of searching harder, I will never be convinced that those officers could not have searched harder. After all, they were looking for my sister. In an area where only hours after they had allegedly conducted a thorough search, I discovered a body. Without sounding too spiteful about the whole thing, it cannot have been much of a search, can it? In retrospect, I can perhaps understand why the police somehow managed to miss the corpse. They had focused their attention on the path they believed that my sister had taken on her way home. Had they been made aware that Dawn was more likely to veer off the path and take a shortcut through the thicket, then perhaps they would have discovered the body just as quickly as I did. Instead, they needed me to find it. I remember that when I arrived home, beating on the door with both fists and screaming at the top of my lungs, my parents' first instinct was to chastise me. They were already living the nightmare of having a missing child, and the idea that I would add to that by sneaking out seemed like an unthinkable betrayal, an act of disobedience that was only going to make matters worse. In a way, I suppose it did, but not in the way they thought. Once the fog of anger and confusion finally began to lift, my parents and the police finally began to listen. "It's a werewolf!" I screamed. "A werewolf! Got him! It might have got Dawn! Oh my god, it's a wolf!" At first, the police, taking over from my parents, tried to calm me and began at once to dismiss my words as the hysterical cries of a worried sibling. They began with commands and statements.
"It's okay, lad. Calm down, just calm down and listen. There's no such thing as..."
It was only when they saw the blood caked up my hands and wrists that the statements were quickly replaced by questions.
"What is this? Is that blood? Why is there blood all over you? Are you hurt? Where did this come from? Answer me, lad. Where did the blood come from?"
Falling to the floor in a crumpled heap, trying as best as I could to calm my breathing, I sat, rocking slowly back and forth, as my mother came to my side and began, in a comforting gesture, to rub my back in the hope of calming me down. "It's not mine. I don't know whose it is. I mean, I don't know who he is, but he's dead. In the woods. He's there and he's dead and... oh God, there's pieces." The police looked at each other, then at my parents, and slowly back at me, a young boy with tears streaming down his face and blood dripping from the ends of his fingers. 5 minutes later I was, for the second time that night, standing before the tattered carcass of a man. It lay just off the shortcut path in the thicket, though to say it lay in just one place would not be entirely accurate. The man's body, or at least what had been his body, was torn to pieces. Scraps of it rested in the bushes, other parts scattered in the long grass. The main part, the body minus the head, with the rib cage cracked open and organs missing, as if the innards of the man had been emptied out with a giant scoop, lay at a right angle to the path onto which my sister had stepped earlier that evening. Seeing this awful scene, the female police officer, as if instinctually, turned me away and covered my eyes, as if it wasn't me who had seen the thing in the first place and led them to it. Struggling from her grasp, I wrenched myself free and approached the corpse again. Squatting down beside it, I pointed to the tracks and explained what I had pieced together when I had first seen them. "Dawn walked here," I said with a level of calm that surprised even me. "You can see her footprints in the mud coming from the direction of Jen's house." Gesturing further up the path and behind where the officers were standing, I pointed to the other tracks. "This guy came running toward her. You can tell by the way the footprints are only of the toe. That shows he was running, off the path in this direction. I think, to help. I think Dawn screamed and this guy came trying to help her."
Or she screamed because he was running toward her. "Thanks, Sunshine, but I think we'll take it from here. Now come along and..."
"No," I said firmly. "It wasn't him that made her scream. He wouldn't have known she was there. He wouldn't be able to see her from the path, and besides..." I pointed to the third set of tracks. Those were not boot prints. The indent made by the heel, the crescent on one side, looked like the barefoot prints of a very large man, but the front of the foot, the indents made by the 4 front toes, said otherwise. Widely spaced and each with a long, straight groove made by a claw, they looked more like bear prints than human. The conclusion, for me at least, was obvious. The print looked half man and half wolf. What else could it be? They're werewolf prints, half man, half animal. That's what made her scream. That's what's making those horrible sounds, killing cattle all around Moorton. It's not the wind or the water or whatever. It's a wolf. A werewolf. The officers again looked at each other.
Now listen, son, there isn't...
By this point, I was not interested in hearing the officers' opinions, excuses, and dismissals. At this point, I didn't want them to talk at all. I wanted them to do something. So I interrupted. Don't tell me there's no such thing. What the hell do you think did this, eh? The wind? Whatever got him tore him apart? Those are teeth marks. There and there and there and there. I pointed again and again to the various pieces of the corpse and the parts left behind. Even if it isn't a wolf, whatever it is needs to be caught. Now you can stand here and argue, or you can help me. Dawn's tracks stop here. She either ran into the woods and escaped, or the thing took her. I think she screamed. The guy came to help her, and whatever this thing was, it killed and ate parts of him. But her blood isn't here, and neither is. I hesitated, swallowing the flood of tears that threatened to rise in my throat and forcing it downward. Neither is her body, so again, she's either out there, or it has her. Either way, we need to look, and we need to look now. The male officer's face remained stern, set and unchanged, but the female officer was nodding.
We'll get someone on this, to remove the body and mark it as a crime scene. Then we'll find your sister, but you young man are going home. That's more than enough excitement for one night.
A half hour later, I was back in my bedroom, under the duvet with my father sitting at the end of the bed. His face, much like the male officer's, was a fixed mask that showed little of the emotion boiling beneath the surface. In a way, his expression was like a curtain or veil, hiding what was clearly going on behind. To his credit, my father did not shout, scream, or cry. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and listened carefully to my words. In a flooding panic of words that seemed to spill out of me in an uncontrolled torrent, I told him what I suspected, what I knew about werewolves, and what I feared might have happened to Dawn. I told him that I did not trust the police to get the job done, and that I needed to be out there trying to find my sister. Having heard my words, he rose slowly on legs that I could tell felt like jelly. Finally, he coughed to clear his throat. Then slowly he spoke.
So I think you should try to get some sleep, son. The police are doing everything they can. Your mother would kill me if I allowed you to go out there, even if I do think you probably know more than they do right now. I trust you, lad, but if you're even half right, then it's too dangerous.
He rose from the bed and headed toward the door.
Your mam's asked me to lock that window, and if it doesn't stay closed, to nail the damn thing shut if that's what it takes to stop you getting out again. Do you understand?
I nodded slowly, but as I did, I watched my father pace slowly across the room to the window. I fully expected him to slam it shut to emphasize his point. Instead, he lifted the bottom frame, sliding it upward and leaving it open to the elements.
I love you, son. Night-night.
With that, he walked toward the door and without saying another word, left the room, closing the door firmly behind him, shutting it fast. For the first ever time. Sitting up in bed, I looked again to the open window, to the wall of fog lurking just beyond the curtains, threatening at any moment to slip and creep into the room. Unless, of course, I slipped out of it first. Again, I am no hero. I did not leap from the bed holding my sword aloft and screaming vengeance for my sister. I did not arm myself with silver bullets and promise to slay the beast, nor did I even leave with the intention of hunting the thing. Instead, I stepped for a second time onto the tree with the intention of arming myself in another way. Reaching the base of the tree, I set off for the second time that night, but this time I did not head to the woods. Instead, I ran in the other direction, toward the only form of armory that I knew the town to possess. I went toward the library.